Alright guys, today we are going to be doing CHING number 142. So the first item that I have was a men's Gucci Envy aftershave splash. I actually picked this up at a yard sale over the summer for $1 and it sold for $199.99, which is insane. A lot of people had them listed in the $300–$400 range, but they weren't selling for that high. So when I listed mine for the $199.99, it went fairly quickly. So that was awesome, turning $1 into like $200. Next item actually came from the antique store, the one that Eric and I have our booth at. Every time, well not every time, but most of the times when we go in to restock the booth, we take a look around at the other vendors, and Eric actually spotted this first. This was a vintage Brinco ceramic lamb wall pocket. So this is actually a harder to find piece, and we paid with that dealer's discount $53 and it sold for $129.99. So that was a pretty good find. I actually talked to the lady who owns that booth in the mall the other day when we were in, because I was telling her how I loved her booth. I love looking at her stuff, and made mention that I was the one that purchased the wall pocket from her, and she was saying how they were selling really high online, but she doesn't sell on eBay. So not everyone does deal with, you know, selling on eBay. So that's why sometimes you can find decent stuff in antique stores, because not everybody is selling online. Let's see, next item came from Whatnot. So already we have 3 different places where I sourced from. I don't always source on Whatnot, but it can be a good place to source. Not always. Sometimes I do feel, you know, when I'm watching some shows, things go for way over retail. I contribute that to people just in the moment, like not having the time to look stuff up and just really wanting, you know, whatever is being shown. But there are times you can find some good stuff. So this was a vintage Ralph Lauren teddy bear sweater. These are pretty desirable. With shipping and everything, I paid $53 for the sweater and it sold for $259.99. So that was still a really good profit. Next item went to a subscriber named Dina. This came from Goodwill. You just saw this in one of my last videos. I picked this up at Goodwill. It was a little gourd angel, but it was double-sided. So the one side had this really happy smiley face and the other side just a really sad grumpy face. It was so incredibly cute. I think I paid $1.99 for that, and it sold for $12.99. You saw one of these in one of my last cha-chings, I think, but we had a couple of them and they have been pretty consistently selling here lately. So I think I remember in one of my last cha-chings I said, like, I'm pretty sure it was someone who sells on Whatnot who purchased this pack of vintage from 1994 Fleer Marvel cards to potentially like do an unboxing and selling on Whatnot. So I don't know if maybe someone else seen that and then decided to go buy themselves one to do, kind of thing, if he was getting some good cards out of there. But anyway, it sold, again, another box, $350, and that came from an auction. Next item also came from an auction. This is for a vintage Lumitime alarm clock, it's called. A really cool piece. Typically, these clocks can sell pretty high, like $300 to $400 range. This one did have a little bit of an issue with one of the numbers wasn't coming in completely clear. It was kind of like breaking up a little bit. But to anyone who knows how to fix clocks, that's probably a fairly easy fix. So Eric won this at an auction. They plugged it in and you could see that the one number wasn't working properly, so nobody wanted to bid on it, but I knew it was still a good alarm clock, and like I said, I figure someone who can potentially fix it can resell it for more. So we only paid $1 for it and ended up selling for $107.50. So that was still really awesome profit, and the person who did win it, they do sell clocks, so they probably know how to fix it, and they'll probably resell it for like closer to $400, potentially even $500, because it is a very desirable clock. Maybe I should have looked into seeing how much it would cost to fix it. Next item. Okay, so I sold one of these in my last Chings. This was a Tremper Rise Ocean City, Maryland carousel horse. So Eric had won quite a few of different versions of these horses. I currently have a giraffe one listed. I haven't been listing them all at the same time, just because, quite frankly, like, if someone buys more than one, we don't really want to ship them together, because it's just, you know, it has the long stick piece and they're kind of heavy on the bottom, and it's a little frightening. So we've been listing them one at a time. Anyway, this one here was for, the horse was called Thundercloud, and it sold for $161. So these have all been selling really decently, and I'm curious to see what each one will go for. Like, if there's gonna be one that just like goes crazy, or if they're all gonna be around the same price range. Next item, I had this for a while. This was a vintage from 1978 Sun Lovin' Malibu Christie Barbie doll. This came from an auction. It was kind of like, there was a lot of dolls at the auction that day, and like I said, I did have this for a while. It did take a while to sell. It did go overseas. This was still sealed, and it sold for $249.99. Next item, someone purchased two of these. So there was two of these that were purchased. It was a vintage from 1997 Avon hairbrush. So two of them together sold for $45.98. Those came from an auction. I sold so many of these because I won so many of them at the auction. I have a couple left. I mean, they are pretty consistent sellers. You know, it's not something like, when I first listed them, like, a lot of them went. I love when I get a cha-ching when I'm doing cha-chings. That's so much fun. We'll look at that afterwards, even though it like kills me not to look now. So what was I saying? The hairbrushes, a lot of them went like when I first listed them, but they are like consistently selling, you know, as people are looking for them. So great profit on those. Next item went to a subscriber named Sandra. She purchased a vintage Empress hat. This was by a brand called Empress. I picked this up, I'm pretty sure, at a yard sale, and that sold for $26.99. I did send out an offer on that. Next item was for a lot of two vintage Napco little mini spaghetti trim Christmas mice. Those sold for $25.99, and I can't for the life of me remember where I picked them up. Possibly a yard sale. This next item was kind of crazy to me. I was just going through a box of some stuff that Eric brought home from an auction, and you know, I always say there's stuff that he ends up getting that just comes with, you know, things that he won. And I found this vintage atomic fireball candy box, and I was like, you know, I look up everything because you just never know. You don't know unless you look it up. So just look up everything, even if it seems like the dumbest thing to you, just still look it up. So I looked this up, and they were selling, not for a lot of money, but I was just gonna throw it away. It sold $10.50. So I would have threw away a $10 bill and 50 cents there. Next item, this was a repeat buyer, Terry. I'm not sure if that's a subscriber or not. I'm typically pretty good with getting notes into packages when they're repeat buyers, but sometimes I have repeat buyers that aren't necessarily subscribers, and sometimes I don't know the difference. So I apologize if I ever make any kind of mistake where it is a subscriber and maybe a note doesn't get put in or something like that. I am only human. I do make mistakes and don't realize things, so I can't say for certain if a note got into this one or not. But this was a ceramic little sleeping mermaid. She sold for $39.99, and she came out of a house that Eric and I did a private pick at. Next item probably came from a yard sale, maybe a fill-a-bag rummage sale. I can't remember. I had this for a while. This was a vintage Seattle Seahawks winter beanie hat that sold for $59.99. So like I said, had for a while, but finally found, you know, someone who had to have it. Next item came from an auction, one of the beauty auctions. This was a Serious Skincare Body Cream that sold for $45.99. Also sold a Nintendo DS game of Pokemon Diamond. This was just for the game. Just a loose cartridge. It didn't have its box or manual or anything like that. But it still sold for $29.99. That came from a yard sale. Next item, this also was from like a beauty auction. It was a vintage Estee Lauder fragranced soaps. These were shaped like pears. They were still sealed, and they were in the scent called Alliage, if I'm pronouncing that right. They sold for $49.99. Also sold a vintage from 1987 Cabbage Patch Kids doll for $49.99. That came from a yard sale, I'm pretty certain. You saw this in one of my last haul videos. This was like a ceramic bisque doll with the molded butterfly bonnet hat. I was so surprised by this doll. She came with some other dolls that I won at that same doll auction where that Malibu Barbie came from. And I just didn't really go through the tote because, you know, I already had listed everything that, you know, I meant to buy from that auction. I didn't get a chance to go through all of the random stuff. And this was one of those random dolls that I didn't necessarily bid on it to win it type of thing. And again, I looked it up. It wasn't in the best condition. Her dress was pretty tattered. She had a repair on her foot, so I wasn't really thinking she was gonna be worth a whole heck of a lot until I looked her up and I saw that these molded butterfly old ceramic dolls were selling pretty decently, and she sold for $57. So that really surprised me. I'm pretty sure that doll went overseas as well. Let's see, we sold a Tom Bruni pottery teapot with 3 cups. Eric won these at an auction, and they sold for $59.99. We just lotted those all together. Next item came from an auction. This was a Yankee candle in the scent White Linen and Lace that sold for $29.99. I think I actually had more than one of these, and they all sold. I also sold a sealed Game Boy Advance game. This was a Peter Pan game for $39.99. Eric won a bunch of Game Boy games at an auction one day. Sold a Westmoreland slag glass. These were 2 doves on a nest. Really pretty slag glass. That sold for $54.99. That more than likely came from an auction. We sold a Viking glass blue owl fairy lamp that sold for $179.99, and that came from the lady that we were buying a bunch of Viking glass from. You actually saw this next item. I'm pretty sure my last CHING I had 2 of them, and now they both sold. This is a Carlton Cards Sesame Street Cookie Monster Christmas ornament. Very desirable one if you ever find this one. It seems like it would be one that would be not necessarily super easy to find, but maybe a little more easier to find since it's Sesame Street. A lot of people do like Sesame Street. Anyway, sold for $120, so that was amazing. I sold 2 of them for the same price of $120. Here's another Viking glass owl fairy lamp. This one was in a charcoal color. That sold for $199.99. Like with anything, colors matter to people. So, you know, some colors are worth more than others. We also sold a Mack truck emblem. So this would have been like a metal emblem plate that would have went on the front of a Mack truck grill. That sold for $87. This one was painted. The original owner kind of like painted it red. It would have had a black background, but they painted it red. It still sold for $87, and that came from an auction. We sold a vintage from 1971 Rider-Waite tarot deck. This also came with the book that explained the cards. Those sold for $69.99, and they came from an auction. Next item also came from an auction. This was for a Dansk yellow enamel skillet. This thing was very large and very heavy and super cool looking. I mean, total mid-century modern look to it. That sold for $99.99. Also sold a Monster High doll of Lady Gaga. Now we know some Monster High dolls can sell pretty well. This Lady Gaga one, oh my gosh, if you ever find her, even just pieces of her, it's ridiculous. Had she been complete or anything like that, I could have got way more for her. But this one was missing a part of her leg. It was hard to see because, you know, she did have like a long like jumpsuit on. But one part of her leg was missing, and like her arms couldn't like go back into their sockets properly. I think like the arm piece had like broke off inside the socket or whatever. But people do want pieces to it, like clothing. Some people will take off appendages and heads and put them on other dolls and do all sorts of things with them. So anyway, it sold for $112.50 as it was, like with all those issues. So that's crazy. That did come from a yard sale. It was in, I got like a big tote of Monster High dolls at a yard sale one year, and that was in there. I wasn't expecting that of that one. I sold a 5-piece Tova perfume set for $89.99. This came from, I do believe, a flea market. I had purchased a bunch of perfumes one day from some man who was selling just like a ton of like really nice perfumes. It was a lot of Philosophy. He had Philosophy and Tova were like the two main ones that he had. I think he charged me $8 for that gift set, so that was pretty awesome. Let's see, the next item was a Torrid black velvet floral top that sold for $25.99. That came from a yard sale and I paid $1 for it. Next item went to a subscriber named Barbara. She purchased a gourd cat. I got this at Goodwill. I'm pretty sure I sent an offer out on this for $13.99. I think I have another one listed. I'll have to put an offer out on that one too. Let's see, I sold another candle. This one was by Beekman 1802. I'm pretty sure it was vanilla scented, and that sold for $19.99. Next item came from an auction recently. This was a Limoges egg-shaped little trinket box that sold for $13.50. I've been selling some Valentine Day cards. I have a huge shoebox, just chock full of vintage Valentine's Day cards. A lot of them are probably from like the 50s era, but then there's some that are older. There's some like German ones. So I still have a ton of Valentine's Day cards. It's gonna take me forever to try and list them. I did put some in our booth. I think I sold maybe 1 or 2 so far in there. I put them in there for a lot cheaper than what I have them listed for on eBay, because I don't think I could put $9 on a Valentine's Day card in there and sell it. I don't know, I just think that's too much for Valentine's Day cards. A lot of the times, like when I look around at what other people are pricing stuff for in the mall, like a lot of Valentine cards, I see a lot for just $1. And then, you know, you will occasionally see some like larger ones or older German ones for like maybe $5 or $6, but I feel like $9's pressing it in the booth. But I know I can get $9 for a lot of them on eBay, so a lot of them have just been going on eBay. Anyway, this one had a really cute like rotary whisk on it. What's that? What's the other word for whisk? Is it beater? Yeah, like a little rotary beater. That sold for $9.99. So most of the Valentine's Day cards I list on eBay, I list for that price. I sold a mini Boyd's Bear. This had a little sweater on with hearts. So, you know, Valentine's Day theme. Valentine's Day stuff is selling. was over $22.99. I know I've said before, I feel like the mini Boyd's Bears prices have plummeted. They're not worth as much as they were selling for, so don't know if they'll come back up or when, but you know, if I'm still picking them up for like a quarter or something, I'm still gonna pick them up because I just can't say no to them. Kind of like gourds, can't say no to gourds either. Next item was a Holt Howard. They call these pixie wares. This one was for instant coffee, came with a box. This came from an auction that sold for $389.99. Next item also came from an auction. I had never seen this game before in my life. It's from 1979. It was called the Gnomes board game. Absolutely amazing and actually desirable. So this one here sold for $149.99. Also sold a Gem Roadster. This was Gem's car, but it was also a radio as well. It played music. Came with a box, the instructions, it was complete. That sold for $299.99. Also sold a vintage, they called these smooshies. They were, I don't know if they were like an 80s toy or a 90s toy, around that era, because I remember these when I was younger. So it was like a little figure that was smooshy, you know, and it would come with like a, just something you could like stick it in, like just shove it in type of thing. Anyway, this one was of a rabbit and an egg. So you could just smoosh the rabbit into the egg. That sold for $17.99. Probably came from a yard sale. This next item was a lot of vintage. These were all marked Hong Kong. Little mini plastic ducks, just all different kinds of ducks. I'm assuming people like craft with these things. Those sold for $10.50. I have more of these and I've just been kind of like lotting them into like animals. So I made like a whole duck lot. So I'll have to look through my bag and see what next lot of animals I can put together, but I do have more of those. I have more of these things too. These are by Franconia. They're wind up toys shaped like fruits. This one was of a banana. It sold for $19.99 and it was not working. It didn't move. Like you couldn't wind it up. I'm assuming it was just overwound. Again, I don't know if there's like a way to fix those types of things, but I also have a grape and something else. There's another fruit that I have. I think it's an orange. And when they are working, they're worth more, obviously. So, and my orange and grape, I think, are both working. So I need to get those listed. Next item was an Italian sculpture by A. Santini. We took a best offer on this for $84.99, and that came from an auction. Next item was a Victorian looking ceramic couple, and they kind of had a Christmas theme going on, and they were one of those things where like when you sit them together it looks like they're both leaning in for a kiss. We won like quite a few of these like kissing type couples in a lot from an auction, and there was one specifically that I wanted, and at the moment now I can't even remember which one it was, but I ended up with like a bunch of different versions of these kissing couples. Anyway, sold for $19.99. Next item was a vintage Santa kind of plastic face doll. This sold for $19.99. I had this listed and then I took it down and put it in the booth for Christmas, but it didn't sell in the booth. So after Christmas, I took it out of the booth and relisted it on eBay and it sold. We sold a pink Scotty dog planter for $12.99. That came out of a tote of stuff from a private pick. Here's another Valentine's Day card. This one was actually one of the German ones. It was a fold out Valentine card. Again, sold for $9.99. Here's another Valentine Day card this one was really cute. Kind of has like an anthropomorphic look of a pirate bear. That sold, again, $9.99. And the last thing that I have is a Game Boy Advance game. This one was called Top Gun. sold for $19.99 and came from the same auction where, like I said, Eric was buying Game Boy games. So that is everything for the Cha-Ching. 30 days down, 40% still down. I feel like sales are, I know I said in my last Cha-Ching that like even when eBay says I'm down, sometimes I don't feel like I'm down just because I think sales are so good, you know, like high price sales and that type of thing. So I still think sales are doing okay. Obviously they could be better, but you know, I'm not complaining with how they are now. I feel like January can be a bit of a slow month with sales because of, you know, coming out of Christmas and all of that. People are being a little more conservative with their spending after spending so much, you know, at Christmas time and what have you. So I'm not too concerned there. And as far as the booth goes, we're still doing pretty well. All things considered, like I said, again, it being January and everything. You know, we don't have a sale there every single day. Like, it's not every day that something sells, but you know, we are just still having so much fun with it. And right now there's a lot of like Valentine's Day, Easter stuff in. So, you know, after Valentine's Day, obviously all the Valentine's Day stuff's gonna come out. And it's just so much fun to figure out what to put in next kind of thing. And then there's sometimes like things go in, and especially like bigger stuff, and I'm hoping like the bigger stuff goes so I can put something else big in to replace it, because our booth isn't like overly huge or anything like that, so I can't put in everything that I would like to, especially when it comes to like furniture, because I actually have some like really nice pieces of furniture that I want to put in. Just like, you guys know about like the Hitchcock chairs and the Hitchcock bench. I have a rocking chair. I have these like really cool plastic like mid-century modern chairs as well that we got from an auction. I had Eric bid on them. So all of that stuff is just like, you know, sitting in our storage unit, and I'd love to get it out and put it in the booth, but obviously there's no room right now. So I'm hoping some like larger stuff will sell so I can like bring in more of that type of thing, but it is what it is. Let's check that Cha-Ching real quick. Oh my goodness, that's funny. Okay, so we sold, this thing was cool. This was an old stoneware, kind of like an advertising piece, but also a usable piece. It was called a Red Rose Rabbit Pellets. That was like the advertising for. So it was a stoneware little rabbit pellet dish to put your rabbit feed in. Sold for $75. That came from an auction. I knew it would sell eventually. I feel like we didn't have that for too long either, so that's awesome. But yeah, that is pretty much everything for this Cha-Ching. I'm trying to think of anything else to talk about. Oh, I do have something to talk about. Yesterday, Amelia, where she is, or I'd bring her in here and put her up in my video, but yesterday Amelia went to the vet she had 2 shots she needed. One was a Lyme shot, and I don't even remember what the other one was, but she got 2 shots. So last time she had her shots, like, she was fine. She didn't have any kind of like weird side effects or anything like that. Well, yesterday, we made sure that we were home with her all day, even after the shots, just to, you know, make sure. Well, both Eric and I were listing. He was downstairs, I was upstairs, and typically she's usually with one of us, and I'm sitting upstairs and I don't see her, so I figured, you know, she's still like downstairs with Eric or something, but I'm calling for her and she's not coming, which is unusual for her, because if you call for her, she comes. And I was in the middle of listing, so I was, you know, completing what I was doing, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, that's really weird. Why is she not coming? So I didn't really think too much of it. Well, I finished what I was doing, and I looked down the stairs, and she's laying on the second to last step. And even when I'm standing there calling for her, she refuses to get up from the step and come to me, which is super odd. It's like, okay, something's going on here. So I go down there and she doesn't really want to get up from the step. So I pick her up and I take her upstairs and I sit her down, and she just kind of like lays back down. Like she doesn't want to stand. She didn't want to walk. And I was like starting to freak out, you know what I mean? Like something's wrong. She's having some sort of like side effect from the shot. And I gave her, I have these little treats that I give her when I put her hair up in her little bows. So I gave her one of those and she took it. So I was like, okay, well, she wants a treat, so she can't feel that bad, right? So, but my brain was like worst case scenarios, because that's just how my brain works. Like I'm freaking out a little bit, and then I'm calling for Eric. I was like, something's wrong with the dog, something's wrong with the dog. So he comes up and he's like, okay, well, let's call the vet, you know what I mean? Like obvious logicalness of that. Like, yes, we need to call the vet. We need to take her to the vet. Something's wrong, you know what I mean? So I call the vet and I'm telling her, I was like, something's wrong with the dog. I said, we just had her in for her shots earlier this morning, and she's acting weird. She's like not wanting to move. It seems like she's in pain, and I'm like freaking out. And the lady is probably thinking like, oh my God, here we are with like an overprotective dog mother, like going crazy. And she's like all trying to be like super reassuring, like it is a side effect from the shot. They can get very lethargic. You know, she probably has pain in the area that the shot was in. And I assumed like the shot was like, you know, in like the scruff of the neck, but it was in her leg. And I guess like she got some swelling in the leg and some pain there, and you know, it was hurting her. So she conferred with the vet over the phone, and she's like, okay, well, you can come in and we will prescribe 2 pain pills for her. Take one right now and then one, you know, later in the evening if you feel like she needs it. So in the meantime, when Eric went to go pick up the pills, I'm Googling like side effects of Lyme shot and all this other stuff, and I'm like starting to like freak out because, you know, you overread things and stuff like that. So as soon as he came home, we gave her the pill, and she was still, I think it took like a couple hours. Towards the evening, she was definitely acting better. Like she was more like wanting to play, but you could tell she was still a little hesitant about things. Like her leg was probably still tender. I don't know how much of that was like her being dramatic, because she is a very dramatic dog. So, but you know, I don't help matters either when I'm like super overprotective about it. But you know, I just can't help it. She's my baby. So anyway, this morning she is completely 100% back to normal. She didn't have to take her other pain pill. So next time she has any kind of shots, the vet said that they will send home some pain pills with us in case, you know, it happens again. Because like I said before, the first time she had her shots, no, there was no side effects like that. So I don't know why it was different this time. I have no idea, but she's all better, so I'm really happy about that. But that's pretty much everything, all of my rambling to do. So I hope you guys enjoyed this cha-ching. Let me know how sales are going for you. And yeah, I will see you next time.